We're here this morning to talk about military deposits. We've got a lot of information to cover. What I wanted to point out first is that, well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Karen McManus, and I work in the Benefits Officers Training and Development Group. I work as a liaison between the retirement program and the agencies. We write guidance, we work on the CSRS and FERS handbook, and we give answers to the headquarters level retirement counselors. I've worked at OPM for 23 years. I started out in the FERS division processing FERS retirement cases. So that's a little bit about me. But what we're here to talk about today is military deposits. And there's a lot of information that we could cover here. We could get into military retired pay, and we could get into USERA a lot more, which is when someone interrupts their federal career and goes into the military. But we're going to focus on a very focused topic, and that's military deposits. We are going to touch on USERA only as it pertains to military deposits. So I really want to stress a couple of points. We have folks here in the audience. We have a few. Are there any employees here? Anybody who's not a benefits professional, just an employee interested? We have a couple. Okay, that's great. This broadcast is for employees and agencies, and I'll be reviewing important things for both the agencies and the employees to focus on. So I'm sure we have a lot of employees watching on the webcast as well. So we're going to keep this very focused on deposits. But the first thing before you even start talking about a deposit is we have to start talking about the credibility of the military service. So what happens here is you have an employee, and they're either under the CSRS retirement system or the FERS retirement system. And they have prior military service, or they have military service that interrupts their federal career. In either case, they would like to make a deposit so that that service can also be credible in their CSRS or FERS annuity. So the first thing the employee is going to do is get a copy of their DD-214. The employee is, and I have more information on this, and we'll talk about what form the employee can use if they need to contact the military and get a copy of that. They're going to get a copy of their service record, and they're going to bring it to their agency. And this is where the agency is going to start. And they're going to look at that military service record, and they're going to try to figure out, just based on looking at that DD-214, here's where we're starting, is this service credible? Okay? And what the agency is looking for is it active, and is it honorable? And the other thing that has to be on that DD-214 is the beginning and ending dates of service. So the first slide that I have here is a slide that talks about service that's not credible. It says right at the top of the slide, not credible. So these, when you're looking at DD-214, if the employee has an honorable discharge, that's a good place to start. That's looking good. They're probably going to get credit for this service. But if the discharge on that DD-214 has any of these other things written there, dishonorable discharge, clemency discharge, neutral or uncharacterized discharge, or officer dismissal, starts raising questions and is probably not going to be credible. I think it's important to note that this is not a policy decision on the part of the retirement service. This is the law. The law says that in order to give credit for service, it has to be honorable. Okay? I'll talk a little bit about these types of discharges. I think dishonorable is pretty self-evident what that means. But a clemency discharge, does anybody know what a clemency discharge is? You know, when someone is in the military and they make a decision that they want to leave, but they're not doing it officially through the appropriate channels. The military doesn't really like these kind of discharges. What normally happens is the person will select a country, say Canada. They're an active duty military personnelist, but they will move to Canada and say, I don't want to be in the military anymore. There are a lot of issues with the military, but what the military will do is give that person a discharge on their DD-214, and it will say clemency discharge. That service is not credible because it's not an honorable discharge. Another type of discharge that we see that we have more issues with is the neutral or uncharacterized discharge. Now, what generally happens with folks is they graduate from high school, they're 18, they pick a service to go into, be it, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force. They go into the service, they stay for a few years, and they leave. And what's the first thing that you do in the military? Basic training, right? Some folks get into basic training and realize, man, this isn't for me. This is too much physical, too physically demanding. It's a mutual decision between the person who enlisted and the agent, or the Army, or the military. They're saying, this person's not going to make it through basic training. They've selected the wrong thing to do with their life. Because the military will discharge this person, but they think that the military thinks, we haven't had enough time to really make a judgment about this person. They're leaving the service in a short period of time, whether it be weeks or months. We're going to discharge them. We're going to discharge them under a neutral or uncharacterized because we haven't known them long enough to make a decision about whether their service is honorable or dishonorable. When somebody comes to you with this type of discharge, it's not credible. Now, where we see issues with this is some people have careers in the military, or where they have had military service, will be in the military for 2 years, 4 years, whatever, and then the military sends them to a school. But again, it's for a short period of time. They'll go to a school for weeks or months. They'll get a separate DD-214 for that time period. The school will issue them a DD-214. Because it's such a short period of time, the school will say, we didn't have this person long enough to characterize their service. We're going to give them a neutral, uncharacterized service discharge. And that becomes a problem because now the person's like, but I had an honorable discharge for all my other service. Why aren't you crediting me these few months? And OPM is saying, it's the law, okay? We can only accept discharges that are honorable. And that's what we're looking for. And if it doesn't say honorable, we're not going to give them credit. The person in those situations has to go back to the military and ask for a different discharge. They have to get the honorable discharge on that DD-214 in order for us to give them credit for that service. So that's an important point for agencies, employees, because we're seeing a lot of people being called up, and even those folks go into schools. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and that is that's the law. Okay, the other thing you're looking at when that initial period, when someone comes into you with a DD-214 is, you're looking to see what kind of service it is. Okay, there's basically two types of service. Title 10. Does anybody know what Title 10 military service is? Right, it's federal service. You're active and you're federal. So if somebody is 18 and they enlist into the military, in the regular Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, is that Title 10 service? It sure is. Yes, that's for a federal purpose. Now, what's the other type of military service you can have? Reservists. And you're working for who? A state, right? That's not federal. And what is the title that service is under? Does anybody know? 32. So when you pick up a DD-214 and it says 10, that's very, very Title 10. They're probably going to get credit for that service. You're going to check all these boxes, but that's really a very good indicator. When it's Title 32, now you've got to stop and take a look at this service. Title 32 service is only credible if it's performed under USERRA and it interrupts someone's federal career. If it doesn't do that, it's not credible. So there's more information about that in the handbook. And the other thing I recommend to people, again, if you're an employee, this is where you want to go and talk to your personnel office. And if you're a personnel office and you need further assistance, we have the www.opm.gov/retire. There's a benefits section there. And the benefits officers at the agency level can go in and see who their headquarters level retirement counselor is so they can contact them to get further information. We have a network because of the millions of employees that we service, and OPM has our little benefits officer office. We work with the headquarters level retirement counselors. The headquarters level retirement counselors work with the agencies. But that's where you can get the listing of who the headquarters counselors are, if you're an employee or a benefits person. So you can, if you need help in determining if service is credible or not, go through that network, okay? All right, so now we're getting closer to the topic of the day, which is that in order for the service to be credible, this military service, you have to make a deposit. And the deposit has to be made on service that was performed after 1956. Before 1956, they can just get credit for it. I'm sure you're seeing fewer and fewer employees with military service prior to 56. Most of your employees are going to have had this service performed after 1956. All right, so what you're looking at, again, you got to go to that DD 214 and figure out the beginning dates and ending dates. You're giving them total years, months, and days. The other thing that you're using the DD 214 for is to determine the periods of military service. So you can have more than one DD 214 be in one period of service, because what you're really looking for is a break of at least 1 day. So if they have a break of 1 day, they have more than one military period, and they'll pay a deposit for each of their periods of military service. Okay. Now, how much is a military deposit? We have to get their total earnings from the military. If they're under CSRS, their earnings will be 7%. Pardon me, their deposit amount is 7%, and if they're FERS, their deposit amount is 3%. So that's what we're basing the deposit on. There was a point in time when these deposit rates changed. They went up a little bit. You know how Congress likes to play around with these deduction rate amounts. They're doing it now too. But in the end, they ended up putting it back down to 7. This was done through 99 to 2001. So if you have somebody during that time frame, you'd have to charge them the higher amount. Same thing happened with FERS. And again, what you're looking at here is the total basic pay for the period. You're going to have to get that from the military. Again, I have another section here where we talk about the forms that you would use to go back out to the military and ask for the total earnings. It does not include any allowances, flight pay, combat pay, etc. All right, who is eligible to make a deposit? This is really, really important. And you notice that it shows that the person has to be under deductions, right? They have to be under CSRS or FERS or CSRS offset. That means an employee. So let's think about this for a second. So does that mean, can a retiree make a military deposit? No, because they're not under deductions, right? Military deposits must be paid to the agency. It's structured that way in the law. It's been that way ever since 1956, and it's still that way today. So as an employee, you have to work with your personnel office to get a military deposit paid. You cannot go through OPM. We do not accept the payments, and we do not calculate the payments. So that's why your first step is always to go to your agency, and your agency will be doing everything. They'll be determining whether the service is correct or credible. They'll be computing the deposit, and they'll be billing you for the deposit. They'll be accepting the money, and they'll be transferring the money over to OPM. The agency does everything with the military deposits. Okay. And this is true even when there's a survivor of a deceased employee. They're still going to have to go through the agency to make the military deposit in the same manner that the employee would. This is somebody who the employee hadn't made a decision yet. They died in service. So the survivor can go ahead and make the military deposit as long as they're entitled to a survivor annuity. Yeah, we have a question.
How much time should we give the survivor to make the military deposit?
Okay, the question is, how much time should the agency give the survivor to make a deposit? I know from doing death claims that that is a very serious question because many, many survivors do not want to start working on this issue right away after the death. They're not ready to emotionally even think about making payments. So we don't have a time frame, and I know from the death claim section that we have ended up sitting on cases for almost a year before we finalize them. And so obviously nobody wants it to go on that long because that's not good for any of us to have these cases that aren't finalized. But we don't have a standard answer for that, and you're just going to have to work with them. We don't have any requirement other than it has to be made to the agency. Okay. Who should make a military deposit and the effect of not making a deposit? All right, so we have two retirement systems. We got CSRS and we got FERS, and the rules are a little bit different under each. If you are under CSRS and you are hired before 10/182, then you can not make your military deposit if you retire before the age of 62 and use that service in the computation of your CSRS annuity. However, if at the age of 62 you are eligible for Social Security, we will remove the military deposit from your CSRS calculation, and you will not have the opportunity at that point to pay your military deposit because you're an annuitant now. Who do you have to make the military deposit to? Your agency. We can't accept it. So this is a decision that has to be made before the person separates. So if they're a very specific circumstance, they have to have been employed under CSRS prior to 10/182, they retire before the age of 62, they didn't make a deposit, they use this military service in their CSRS annuity. At 62, if they're eligible for Social Security, we will remove the military service. Now, how can they avoid that? They could pay the military deposit, right? If you pay the military deposit, you don't have a problem. That's true in this situation, and it's also true if you were hired after 10/182. Then you don't have this option, and you either pay it and get credit, or you don't pay it and you don't get credit. That's if you were hired after 10/182 under CSRS. And the only other thing I'll add here is if you retire as an employee like this who was hired before 10/182, and you retire after the age of 62, you have to look at your Social Security eligibility. If you're not eligible for Social Security, then you can use the service and not pay for it as long as you're not eligible for Social Security when you retire. Under FERS, again, it's just like if somebody who hired under CSRS after 10/182, you pay for it, you get credit, you don't pay for it, you don't get credit. It's very simple under FERS. All right. Now we're going to get into those responsibilities that I've touched on, what the employee does and what the agency does. This is the employee service, and I guess I have to keep reiterating too how important it is for OPM to get what we would refer to as a clean case, okay? That was a case where all the work has been done, basically. All the deposits are paid. The service is all documented. It's very clear what this person is entitled to. The cleaner the case is when it gets here, and that would mean in this situation that you've, at the agency, determined that the service is credible, and then you accepted the payment in full, and you've forwarded the final IRR to OPM to show that the military deposit has been paid. It's very important that we get all those things into OPM because then it speeds up our processing, right? The better the quality of the case that we get, the faster we can get someone into final payment, and they're happy and we're happy. So that's the idea here. That's why we have these sessions, so that we're all on board with what we need to do to get the retirement cases done accurately and in a timely manner. All right. Yeah, I have a slide. The question is, does the agency have to include the paperwork with the post-56 military retirement? And the answer is yes, we do ask that the agency include in the retirement package, and I'm going to go through all the forms here in a second that we're going to ask you to include. But the first thing the employee is going to do is go to the personnel office and say, I want to make a deposit, and the agency is going to give them the military deposit form. If they're CSRS, it's going to be the 2803, and if they're FERS, it's the 3108. And at this point, the agency is going to have to sit down with the employee and talk about whether it's beneficial for the employee to pay this deposit. And they're probably going to have to give them a very rough estimate, because they're not going to have going out for the earnings. They're not going to know the whole military deposit. But at the same time, the employee's like, what's the difference? What is that 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? What does that mean to me in my pocket in retirement? Is it going to be worth it for me? So you're going to have to give them a rough estimate with a benefit for their CSRS or FERS benefit showing military service with and without a military deposit paid. And it's an estimate. You have to make it clear at that point, because you're not going to know the real, accurate numbers until you get into this and get all the data. So, okay, so what is the data that you need? You need that DD-214, you need the election form, you get the employee could submit a SF-180 if they don't have a DD-214 to show what their service is. They can go out to the military and get a copy of that DD-214. Then they have to get the earnings. These are the estimated earnings or the actual earnings from the military, and the form that they use to get that is a 2097. Now, if you're at an agency or you're an employee and you want to look at these forms, they're all available on OPM's website. You go to opm.gov/forms. You put in the number that we have in these slides for the form, and the form will come right up, and you can take a look at it. You can fill it out. You can talk to your agency about it, okay? So that's where you get the forms. Now, the payments for the military deposit have to be made to the agency, and it can be done in a lump sum or in installments. But again, and I'm going to be harping on this, because this has to be made at the agency, you cannot walk in the month before retirement and expect to be able to do installments on a military deposit. It's just not going to work out. If you're moving into retirement, or if you're in 6 months of retirement, you're going to have to make a lump sum payment or have very large installments because it has to be finalized before that separation date. All right, the other thing, well, now we're moving into what the employee office does, the personnel office does. The personnelist is going to explain the effect of not paying the post-56 military deposit, like they might not get credit for that service. And this is an important point, they counsel the employee to document the basic pay earned as soon as possible. So from the employee perspective, there's a couple of reasons why it would be a good idea to pay the military deposit sooner rather than later, okay? And I know this is hard because when somebody's first hired, they're not really listening, right? And then the agency is going to have to keep blasting people with emails telling them, really look into this military deposit. And why is it so important? This is one of the points. Is it easier to get records from a large bureaucracy 5 years after you left that bureaucracy or 40 years after you left that bureaucracy? Which one do you think is easier? 5, day 1, right? The sooner you do it, the better the quality of the records you're going to get. There's just no way around this. The military has millions of people that they have coming through their doors, and so does your agency. So the sooner the employees start on this, the better for them. They're going to get higher quality records, okay? That's number one. The other thing, and we're going to be talking about this in a second, as soon as somebody is hired into the federal government and they're covered under deductions, under CSRS or FERS or CSRS offset, they have a 3-year grace period where they don't pay interest, right? So we all know about compounding interest, right? We like our thrift because that's compounding interest, right? The magic of compounding interest that goes up. But you know what? You don't like the magic of compounding interest when you have a bill, do you? You don't want that on your credit card. And this is the same concept. You don't want the magic of compounding interest on your military deposit. It won't be pretty. So get in there in those first 3 years, get those records, and really figure out what you want to do. Because remember, you can do this in installments. I know a lot of times employers are like, but I just started and I have all these bills. And you can work with your agency to get on an installment program. And if you're doing it in the first 3 years, you're doing it interest-free. So it really is important to just try and see what it would cost, because it's going to cost you more in dollars the longer you wait. Okay?
I have a question, maybe a minute.
Sure.
If you wait, 3 years, let's say you wait 5 years, you pay interest just on the 2 years after the 3 years?
All right, we had a question about the interest, and I am going to talk about this more in a minute, but I'll go ahead and answer it right now. He asked, if you do not pay your deposit in the interest-free period, which is for 3 years, when you do pay it, and let's say you go in at the 5-year mark to pay it, do you pay interest for 2 years or do you pay interest on all 5 years? And the answer is you would pay interest on 2 years, and I'll explain why in a second. Okay? All right, and the other responsibilities for the employing agency is to go through all this paperwork with the employee and to help them determine if it's worth their while to go ahead and make this deposit by giving them the benefits estimates. Provide them with the forms. Then the employing agency accepts the forms. They may have to assist with the verifying. I know that a lot of the agencies really have to help, depending on the situation and depending on what kind of military service it is. It may take several attempts to get information from the military. It can be a very involved process. So this is all what the agency does. There's a form 1514 where the agency can compute the interest by hand. Amazingly, I know that some agencies still do this by hand. Others have calculators that can do this for them or programs. So, this is from an agent by an agency by agency. So you're going to have to talk with your agency if you're new to personnel or if you're an employee to figure out what your agency has available. And we also say that the lowest payment that most agencies will accept is $50. But again, that's up to the agency, and that's just our common knowledge. Your agency probably has very specific rules, and you need to talk to them to find out exactly what your agency's rules are for this. Were there a question? Okay. The other thing the personnel office does is establish the deposit account, enter the payments, keeping track of it on that 1514 or by another means. And then the final thing that the agency does, and from OPM's perspective, this is the most important thing, is they cut the IRR showing us that the deposit has been fully paid and you're ready to transmit it to us when the person would, at the end of this it says when, retires or separates or dies. Yes?
If you have an employee who begins making installment payments and changes employment to different federal.
All right, the question is, what do you have an agency, an employee who begins making the installment payments and then transfers agencies? They're gonna have to transfer that deposit with them to the new agency, and the new agency should accept what's already done. They shouldn't back out or refund that partial payment. It should just transfer over, and then the payment should be able to continue. But the employee is going to have to work with both agencies and make it clear to them that this is an ongoing payment. It's just the same kind of thing that when somebody transfers and they have like a TSP loan or something, it's not necessarily done automatic. You've got to make sure, this is something that employees need to speak up about so it's not missed. Just a couple other questions here in the audience. Go ahead.
Say you're making the military deposit and you're ready to retire. You say you can't retire unless you pay the money, right?
Right.
So can the person use his TSP to pay before they retire?
All right, so the question is, if somebody has to pay a military deposit before they retire, would it be possible for them to receive a payment from the thrift? That's a very involved question because you can't just take money out of your thrift. You could probably get a loan from your thrift for a reason, and you might be able to give the thrift the reason that you need to make a military deposit as the reason that you needed to basically loan yourself money so that when the thrift pays out, they would take the loan that you've already received into consideration and then you would pay taxes on it. But the issue here is that you just can't, getting into your thrift is based on your age and whether or not you've separated. So you can't just take money out of your thrift without tax consequences.
I guess the reason why I asked that is because they say when you turn 59 and a half, you can take money out of your thrift.
That would be your age.
Penalized, I think it's 1 point instead of 2 points. So at that time, could you take that money out of your?
So his question is, if you were 59 and a half, could you take the money out? Yes, you would be penalized, and yes, you would pay taxes on it. The way to get around that would be to go for a loan, so you wouldn't pay a penalty. But this is something you'd have to work out with the thrift. This is an involved consideration, and you'd want to talk to your personnel office about it. It's possible, but you need to talk to them.
I have one more question. When you retire, when you start making your payments for military service deposit, does the interest stop at that point, or does the interest still apply at the end of the year?
I'm going to talk about the interest more in a second.
Okay.
But the question here is, I don't want to forget it, is when you start making payments, does the interest accrual stop? And the answer is no, and I'm going to talk about why when I get to the interest accrual.
Okay.
And there was another question. Yes, sir.
If an individual is making installment payments and hasn't completed them but retired, is that money refunded to him?
All right, so now the question is, what happens when somebody is making installments but makes a partial deposit and doesn't make a full deposit and they retire? We will refund the money back to the individual if we receive a partial military deposit at OPM, because we can't accept payments. We can't accept a military deposit payment. So we would have to refund the military, and the person would not be able to make it. So that's why they would have to establish with their agency that they are going to pay this and they want to complete the payment on that IRR, that record that is right here on this slide. We have to get that final IRR fully paid in order for them to get credit. They have to make it clear, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, in the documentation that they're sending, whether or not the person has made the military deposit. Yes?
If someone makes a full deposit and then they leave federal service, do they get a refund?
If someone makes a full deposit, okay, that is a separate issue. In order to get a refund from when somebody separates, all of their documents are sent to Boyers, or the retirement program. We have a operations center in Pennsylvania. That's what I'm referring to when I say that. So we store the documents, whether they're electronic or paper. So all of this person's records, when they separate, will be stored by OPM. And when that happens, we don't automatically just pay somebody we don't know what they're going to do. They could go get another job. So we receive those records and we do nothing. After 30 days of being separated, if an employee wants to get a refund, they would apply for a refund for everything. You can't just apply for a refund for your military. You apply for a refund of all the contributions you have put into the CSRS retirement fund, and you would receive a refund of all of them. There are really heavy implications with that, and you may not be able to, well, under the new rules, if you're reemployed, you could pay them back. But still, it's something to consider whether or not you want to do that or not, because you're going to get, again, hit with interest on repaying that money. Does that answer your question? Okay. So one of the other forms, we're still going through the forms that the employees would be mailing into us. This is a survivor form. It's a 1519, and it merely shows the survivor's intent to make the election. Again, as it's already been pointed out, this is a big decision for survivors, and this is the first step in talking to them and giving them estimates and helping them understand what the implications would be if they did or did not pay it. So they actually have a form where they mark whether they intend to pay it or not. There used to be a form like that for employees as well, but we've done away with that form. Employees no longer tell us their intent. They merely fill out the military deposit application and go through with it, or they don't go through with it. The only other way that we would know what the intent is of an employee, and this is an important point for processing. This is important for employees, and it's important for the benefits personnel. What we refer to as the -1 is the Certified Summary of Federal Service. And this is when someone fills out the retirement application, they list the service that they think that they have. And hopefully what they think they have matches up with the records that we have stored for them, right? That's the perfect world. We're back to clean cases and messy cases, okay? So a clean case would come in, somebody would write on their certified summary service, I had military service, I had non-deduction service, I had service under CSRS, I had service under FERS. And this is all my service. And what we have on our end as far as IRRs or payroll documents would match that. So it's very important that the employee and the agency make sure what's on the certified summary is correct. And it's very important that if the intent of the employee is to pay the military deposit, even if it has been paid and you have all the documents, that you write on the -1 that it has been paid. Because what could happen? When the personnel office is done with this application, where do they send it? The payroll office. And then what happens after the payroll office has it? Where do they send it? OPM at Du Bois. So that's 3 hands that touch your application until it's finalized. And sometimes records disappear. And you don't want to be one of those people. You want to be really clear, and you don't want your employees to be a person who has any missing records. So you want it to be abundantly clear on that -1 what it is this person has, so there's no confusion later. Okay. The other thing that the agencies are due will counsel the employees and the survivors on the implications of not paying the deposit. And you have to document all the earnings, the estimated earnings, the actual pay records. Because, and here we come to a more involved issue, there are 2 types of military deposits. What I've been focusing on this morning is what we would call the regular method. And there's an alternative method. So I'm back to talking about people who enter the military while they're interrupting their federal service. So we put out a BAL 03105, and it talks about when someone is placed in leave without pay, which is now called absence US, the agency would put someone in that person has been called up for the military. There's new laws that were passed back in the early 2000s that affect them, the Uniform Service Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, USERRA. And so these are people who have service, military service, that interrupts their federal career. We're seeing a lot of that, right? If you're a personnelist, you're like, we get this all the time now. Depending on your agency, you could have it a lot. So with these folks, and just these folks, just these people who have service that interrupts, military service that interrupts their federal career, they have 2 computation methods. So the regular computation would just be what we described this morning. You have the basic pay, you look at whether they're under CSRS or FERS, you take 7% or 3%, depending on what retirement system they're under, and you calculate a deposit. We haven't gotten to the interest yet. That's in the next section, okay? The other thing to consider here, if somebody's on leave without pay, can they still get payments from their agency? The answer to that question is yes. How would they get a payment? Can you think about what happens when you put somebody in a leave status, as in sick leave or annual leave? What happens when somebody elects to take a sick leave or an annual leave day? Do they get paid? Do deductions for CSRS or FERS come out of their salary? Yes, they do. All right, so in the second bullet, that's what we're referring to, okay? So you have somebody who's in leave without pay for military, but they still have sick leave and annual leave, and they decide to take a day for whatever reason. And they can even take those days around a holiday weekend and get paid for a holiday on top of this, right? This becomes an issue because who's keeping track of this? What we're talking about is a military deposit where we're looking at all their earnings, but you subtract out, you take away the days they've already paid. So somebody has to know when they took leave so that they can remove the days that they've already paid. What's the best source to find out when these days were paid? The most accurate source? Your payroll office. We got that answer in the audience. So your payroll office is your best source. But what's another source that's pretty good, and you need to, as an employee, think about, you, right? The employee needs to talk to their benefits people. They need to, when an employee gets called up, they first need to talk to their supervisor, and the second person they need to talk to is their personnel office. They need to get in there and they need to start a conversation, because your personnel office isn't your enemy when you're in leave without pay. They're your friend. And you want to talk to them, and you want to tell them when you're taking leave, and you want to find out what benefits you would have to pay for and how you pay for them, because there are a lot of issues, whether you have FEDVIP and you've got health insurance and you've got life insurance. It's just not as simple, oh, I walked out the door and I never have to think about my agency the whole time I'm on leave without pay. It's not quite that simple. So I can't emphasize enough that employees need to talk to their personnel office. And personnel offices can send those blast emails, you know, if you are aware that you have anybody in the agency being called up, just to remind them to get in there and talk to you guys. Okay, so you have to know when the person is in leave so you can take it out. And the same is true for the alternative method. Because what these people are going to be able to do when they return to the agency, they're going to have a choice. They can pay that standard military deposit or the regular method, or they can go with the alternative. And the alternative is that they will not pay more than the deductions that they would have paid under the civil service or FERS retirement system while they were out. So we know that the military deposit is 7% for CSRS and 3% for FERS. What is the general, not talking about law enforcement officers or Capitol Hill, just the general CSRS deduction rate? What's the general CSRS deduction rate for a CSRS employee? 7%, right? What's the general rate for a FERS employee? 0.8%, as long as they haven't been hired within the last 2 years. We'll talk about the other new alternatives for the deduction rate in a second. I have a slide with this. But I just want to get this in your head. This is your general thing that you're thinking about. 7% and 3% compared to 7% and 0.8%. So, and we do the same thing here. We're looking at giving the person an alternative method based on their civilian deductions. What are we going to remove? The leave without, or the leave of with pay days. When they got the sick leave, when they got the annual leave. We're going to take those days out. We still have to keep track of them. And it's before interest. We're looking at this deposit before interest. I'm going to get to another side here. So here we have the deposit rates, and here we have the rates for FERS. And we can see that in 2013, there was a new FERS retirement deduction rate that came out, and it's going to be 3.1, and we know that there's another one coming for effective 1/1/2014. We haven't put the guidance out on that yet. It should be coming right now. I know it's in the pipeline. I've seen drafts of it. You should have that very soon. It'll be posted on our website, and we'll put that out on our listserv so you can get the information on the new rates. And this is for new employees. There are some rules governing this as far as having previous service, but it's basically new hires will be affected. Okay, so the other thing I want to say about this is the question I get here a lot of times is, okay, so I have to do this. The agency's like, okay, I have to give this person a comparison. But what if it's just like blatantly obvious which one is better? Do I have to actually do the math? And our answer to that is we have delegated the responsibility for computing these deposits to the agency. That's the way the law was set up back in 1956. And basically, it's your decision, all right? We're not looking at, when we get the documentation in, to make sure that you've done, physically done these computations. Now, the flip side of this is you've got to be talking to that employee, and if that employee is saying, I want both of them, then I would do it for them, because this is really about them making a decision and you helping them make the best decision for them. If it's blatantly obvious and they're under FERS and they're under straight FERS and they're having 0.8 of a deduction coming out. But the other thing that plays into this is, where is their salary higher? where do they make more money? Were they being paid more in the military? Are they being paid more in the civilian job? So that can have an impact on this as well. So you have to sit down with the employee and look at it, and they get to make the choice, and they get to pay. It can't be higher than what they would have paid as a civilian. All right, now we're going to talk about the interest, which has come up a couple times already. And basically, the whole concept here is a 3-year grace period. Both CSRS and FERS provide a 2-year grace period, and then what happens is you establish your IAD, your interest accrual date, and from that point, you have a year for interest to compound first year. So it's basically, because it's compounding the first year, you don't actually get charged. So you get a 3-year grace period, and this is the important part where the employee understands that this is the part where they have no interest, and they should really consider paying their deposits as soon as possible so the interest doesn't accrue. Okay, and this is the way it works under CSRS. There's a lot of people who were hired in the 80s, and these are the people who are still working or retiring soon. So you're going to see these types of folks coming across your desk. I certainly saw one this week where it was a question about an IAD in this time frame. So what happens is for employees first hired under CSRS before 10-183, the interest begins accruing on 10-185. And if you have somebody who is hired after 10-183, then the interest begins 2 years after the date that they are under deductions. And the bottom one is the same under FERS. They're hired after 1-187. Interest accrues 2 years after they are first hired under deductions. And under FERS, in the first bullet, the first employed on 1-187, interest begins to accrue on 1-189. There are a couple other smaller issues here. If they like to transfer to FERS, they have a CSRS component. They maintain a CSRS military deposit. Also, if they elect FERS, they don't have a CSRS component. The interest begins to accrue 2 years from the date of transfer. So that's very specific. They have to elect FERS to get that. Okay, what else we have here? The IAD. So once you establish what the IAD is, once you figure out that it's either they were hired on a specific date or had a FERS election, and you're looking, you have to establish what the IAD is for each employee. For most employees, it will be 2 years after they were first covered under deductions when they returned from the military. Once you establish the IAD, then that IAD is their IAD every year for the rest of their service until they complete full payment. So they will be charged interest every year on their IAD until the payment is made in full. Okay? And that's the last bullet. The IAD follows each year on the anniversary of the first IAD until the deposit is paid.
I have a question.
Yes.
As far as the IAD, or IAD, if you have several periods of military service, if you were the Guard, you have several different deployments, you have several different DD-214, they take the last DD-214?
Okay, the question is, if you have several different DD-214s, how do you establish an IAD? The IAD is established for each period of service, okay? So let's just take an example. Let's say we have somebody who did that whole, I went into the military at 18 thing, okay? And they had a couple of years. And then they're first hired by the federal government when they're 26. So their first IAD for that first period of service would be when they're first hired at 26. That's their first IAD. Now let's say they work until they're 35, and then they're called up in the National Guard for a federal purpose, and they've interrupted their federal career. Now they have a new period of service they go out on. They're in the military for a year, they're on active duty, they return, they want to make a deposit. Now they get a new ID for that period. So each period is handled discreetly by itself. So they would get a new ID for that new period. It's only if they have, it all comes down to when were you first hired after you had the military service. If all your service was before your first hire date, then you have the same ID. If it interrupts, then you're going to have multiple IDs for each period of service. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Yes?
So if you have a number of IEDs, can the employee then choose which period of service they want to buy back for retirement purposes?
Okay, the question is if somebody has a number of IEDs, another way of saying that, they have another number of discrete periods of service, can they pick and choose what periods of service they want to pay? And the answer is yes. You don't have to pay all of your periods of military service. However, you have to pay for each period in full. But you can pick and choose. All right?
So they'll wrap it all up in one payment?
Will they wrap it all up in one payment? No, unless you ask the agency to do that. These are discrete payments. You're going to figure out what the ID is. You're going to have a payment structure for the first period, and then they'd have to do a second calculation, and they may be able to add it together for you and tell you to pay it, but they're going to have to still track it as two separate payments. So, because it is. Okay. This is still saying that you have a 3-year grace period. Here's a picture of the grace period, so it helps to have a diagram. It's showing that you're first covered after military service, you have 2 years grace, and then your IED begins on the 3rd year. All right, and here is an example under FERS. We have somebody who had performed service from 3/10/86 to 5/22/88. They get their first federal appointment on 8/22/89, and the IED date is 8/22/92, 3 years later. And every year on 8/22, they will be charged compounding interest until the payment is complete. Okay? Interest accrues on a calendar year basis if your IED is on January 1st. Otherwise, you will get a composite rate that will incorporate 365 days. It's still going to be a year's worth of interest, but it will be from your IED date, and we'll have the interest rates from 1 year and another year added proportionally. Okay, and now we're at questions. Do we have any other questions in the room? Yes?
My question is, as it relates to military buyback and FERPA. If someone has paid their military deposit, I apologize, I'm sorry. If someone has paid their military deposit in full and then come to find out they were a FERPA case, example, they were under FERS and they should have had the option of being under CSRS, there would have been a significant difference in the amount that they would have paid based off of a 3% versus 7% of their earnings. So if that happens, will they eat the cost because it was a agency or a staffing error
Right.
putting them in FERCA, or how would that be determined?
She asked a very specific question, and I want to make it clear that I'm giving a specific answer, because if she asked a different question, she would get a different answer. Everybody understands that, right? Okay? So she's asking if you have a FERCA error and the person is in FERS and they should have been in CSRS. That's very specific. There are a multitude of FERCA errors. Every FERCA error is different. This is not the answer for every FERCA error. It's the answer for someone who is FERS and should be CSRS. In that case, when you have a higher deposit amount, you would provide the employee with the new deposit amount, explain to them that they can pay it, or they have the option of choosing an actuarial reduction in that instance because of the higher payment. So there is a FERCA actuarial reduction that they could choose where their annuity would be reduced every year for the rest of their life, but they would not have to pay a deposit. That is the only situation where you can get an actuarial reduction on a military deposit.
And
would that be the general actuarial of the 10%?
Yes, the actuarial reduction that is used is the same actuarial reduction that is used for redeposit.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry. Can I do a follow-up and reverse that? If you were CSRS and you should have been FERS?
Well, if you have somebody who is CSRS and they should be FERS, now the military deposit is smaller, and you're just going to refund the money, the excess money to them.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, we got 2 from the web. Let's read them and see what we got. All right, how do we verify active duty service was under Title 32 if it's not reflected on the DD-214? Wow, that's a tough one in that there should be something on the DD-214 to tell you something about that service. You've really got to look for Title 10 and Title 32. If you're not seeing Title 10 and it's unclear to you what type of service this is, you're going to have to go back out with the employee and get the actual orders that they had. I've seen a lot of crazy things over the years, and it's not always credible. It's just not. And the other thing that we're seeing more of is, particularly the National Guard, using the DD-214 for Title 32 service that isn't credible for our purposes. They didn't used to use the DD-214s as much to show the service credit, just in general for an employee to use for any purpose. And we're seeing a lot of DD-214s that are not credible. So if it's unclear to you, I would first go back out and try to get the orders or try to get a corrected DD-214. Then your next step would be to rely on that network for your headquarters benefits officer. You should go to them and they'll end up with us, and we're going to have to physically look at these documents to make a decision about whether or not it's credible. Yes.
Follow up to that question. So that you gave us the employee's responsibility and the agency's responsibility. Should that not be the employee's responsibility to verify that service for us?
Right. So the agency, one of the agencies is asking in that situation, isn't it really more on the responsibility of the employee? And yeah, we get into this all the time. And the employee has to do something here. I mean, if they're coming in and they've got a DD-214 that's not good, they can go back and ask for their orders. They're in a better position. I mean, you've got to have your Social Security number. You've got to go, you know where you were working. You have to go back out to the military and get the most precise records that you can. And it is better that employees do that because they're in a position to know where they served and what they did and what their Social Security number is and all that good stuff. So the more the employees help the agencies, the better. Okay. Any other questions on that? All right, another question that we got is, how do we verify if active duty service was under Title 10 or 2032? Oh, it's really the same question. So there, we got 2 questions about the same kind of thing, and I have the same answer. It's you know, go back out and ask for more documentation. The orders are the next step. And then seeing if you can get another DD-214 that's more clear. We do get this. I mean, obviously there's 2 questions on the same thing. We're seeing a lot more of this Title 32 service coming down the pike because of all these people that are being called up and from their National Guard situations. All right. If we have no more questions, we have time for anybody has anything else? All right. Well, we've discontinued the 1515. But what we're recommending is that you write on the -1 whether they paid it or not paid it, or whether they intended to pay it or not pay it. And then in addition to that, give us the military earnings and give us the DD-214. We are asking for all the documentation. We always had to give us. Okay, so we don't do the 1515 anymore? No, we've discontinued that. Right, the 1515 was discontinued this year. In June, we sent out a BAL. That's a recent thing. Right, we're just asking that you put it on the -1. We're just asking for copies of what you've gotten from the agency or the employee. If you got orders, we'd like to see those too. The basic pay rates that you got. Yes.
I think rather than, for my agency, Postal Service, we've been including the zero balance 1514.
Right, the 1514 would be the form where you actually compute the deposit, and he's saying that the Postal Service includes that as well to show that it's a zero balance. Because again, the personnel office has control over the forms that they have control over. They don't have control over the IRR, which is coming from your payroll office. That's the next step. So you're counting on them to include that. So you're just giving us another piece of information to show this has been paid. This is what was done at the personnel office. Now, we're hoping that the payroll office shows, right. And that's what we're doing on our end too, using that -1. It's all, we're just trying to match up to make sure that we look at the estimate that you provide, to make sure that what we're using matches up. We're looking at that document surface to make sure it matches what we have. And the 1514, including that, would be helpful too, to make sure it matches the 2806 or the 3100. It's just all, it's all a double check.
So if you have the, from your payroll office that says paid in full, you can set that too, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the IRR. If we get the IRR, it says paid in full, that is the preeminent document in our minds. That is the most important piece of information. And, but you can send in all this supporting stuff in case there's any questions. And I'll just go back to that. I'll never get there. There it is. It's just listing everything that you would hold on to and then send to us. And he's saying that the post office includes the 1514, and that's great. We're happy to get, more is better, you know. Less is not more in terms of retirement package. More is more, okay? Is there anything else anybody has any questions about? All right, then John, I think that's it. We thank you for coming, and we're very happy that you signed in today. I hope everybody got something out of this.